I noticed something recently on our own YouTube videos, on the Bad Faith videos, which is that, it puts the top performing videos in a column on the YouTube page. A disproportionate number of those 10 videos or so that are displayed make reference to the squad or AOC. Now, we don't talk about the squad and AOC so often, so that if I see those names, overrepresented among those videos, to me, that's crazy. That means like out of, 20 videos in the last year that might reference them, like half of them have made the top roster, which says something to me really perverse about what the algorithm is doing and then the kind of incentives that are created because that algorithm exists. And I was observing recently, to the extent that these algorithm changes were made by YouTube in order to drive people toward, so-called approved content from, corporate creators, mainstream media. In some ways, it feels like they've exacerbated the incentives to talk about the things that drive clicks, like more radical out there, perhaps disinformation-y type things, because they won't just let independent media compete on the basis of genuine broad interest. Tell me, for those people who don't know a lot about Status Coup and the founding of it, how long have you been doing this, and how have things changed over time?
Thank you. This is like my therapy session. So for those that don't know, in 2016 and 2017, I was at the Young Turks. This was before YouTube changed its algorithm. Mm-hmm. So back in those days, it feels like, 20 years ago, but it was like 5 or 6. Like everybody could rise or fall based on the merits. And I was basically doing this for my own channel at the Young Turks, and we were growing like gangbusters. We grew 140,000 subscribers in less than a year.
Wow.
Part of it was the Bernie campaign of 2016, but it was also being at Standing Rock, going to Flint, and these kind of stories. People loved it then, but unfortunately, timing-wise, when we launched this in 2018, this was after YouTube had changed its algorithm. And the bottom line is, when we use the term algorithm and this and that, YouTube has basically rigged its system to not only prop up, like Wolf Blitzer used to get a couple thousand views, right? Now he's getting hundreds of thousands of views. People suddenly love Wolf Blitzer? No, people's feeds are getting stuffed.
Who the hell is Wolf Blitzer?
Who the hell is Wolf?
If you look at the news section for trending on YouTube, it's Washington Post channel, it's CNBC, it's mainstream outlets. I think Crystal Ball, even herself, has said, being on the Hill for those first 2 years, we had a major advantage. Not that they're not great. I really enjoy them, but we had a major advantage because we were basically on like the corporate algorithm.
Yeah.
Status Coup, I'm doing the same exact stuff, only probably more of it that I did at the Young Turks pre-adpocalypse, pre-algorithm switch. Literally, we're being, I don't want to be dramatic. We're being throttled. Kyle Kalinske has said, Status Coup is the most throttled channel on YouTube. Topics like Flint, people don't see it. Topics I go to cover the Amazon Union Drive at the Staten Island warehouse. I've been there many times. People don't see it. I was on the front lines of the John Deere picket lines in October and November. People don't see it. And it's really frustrating because I know that, people like kind of, horse race stuff and, sometimes a little less serious stuff. But I know when people see the reporting, they generally like it. I've seen a big bump in people subscribing and signing up for memberships when they see it. The problem is, like you said, YouTube is really propping up reactionary stuff.
Yeah.
YouTube is really propping up like interpersonal stuff and basically kind of shock jock stuff.
Yeah. Anger, resentment.
Yeah, and they're
debate, conflict.
And they're burying actual journalism. And I wish I could figure out the formula right now. My best bet, which is I really appreciate you having me on, is getting on channels that are doing a lot better than Status Coup. Because I've seen, like, for example, Kyle and Crystal had me on their podcast a few months ago, and we went up 2,000 YouTube subscribers in a day. And you start seeing comments from people, Jordan, you're back. Like, I'm talking viewers who watched me at the Young Turks 5 years ago who have never seen Status Coup in their feed. So that's the kind of suppression I've been dealing with. And putting aside Status Coup for a second, like, everybody should care about this because at the end of the day, you're already, the few independent journalists that go on the ground and like investigate things, you're already at a disadvantage because corporate media is going to bury it. But if then big tech is going to bury it, that's a problem in terms of getting truth out there on the ground. I think it's really important to hear from real people on the ground, whether it's union drives or worker strikes or the Flint water crisis. So it's really important, I think, that people see that and hear that. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep trucking along as long as I can, and hopefully, people can subscribe to Status Coup.
Well, I'm curious. I want you to explain, in the short term, what is helpful to you personally. Is there a Patreon? How can people donate? But also, before we get to there, do you have thoughts about what kind of structurally would need to happen to make things different? I mean, is there any hope to you that there could be a rejiggering of the algorithm back to a kind of a level set? Do you think that the future of independent media is going to have to be more kind of subscription Patreon based? Are you hoping that some new billionaire, Pierre Omidyar type, who finances The Intercept, will swoop in and create some independent media juggernaut that is a home for lefties, so we don't have to scrape and scramble on the internet, or so that the internet then puts us on a official algorithm the way that, Rising is? I mean, what's your dream outcome, or what do you think is the most likely outcome?
My dream, which I don't know if everybody else buys into this, I would never borrow from Hillary Clinton. But I do think in a lot of ways, up against this kind of big tech suppression, in many cases censorship, we're all stronger together because at this point, people are just on their own little islands.
Hillary Clinton doesn't own Stronger Together. She doesn't. Okay. She doesn't own Solidarity.
But my point is, everybody's kind of on their own island right now, and there's so many. I just call it, like, I hope no one's eating, like a digital diarrhea. There's too much content. People are getting a gazillion notifications a day. A lot of the content is similar. To me, what makes the most sense, if all things equal, egos could be put aside, is some form of network with a mix of commentators, analysts, maybe political satirists, investigative reporters coming together. To me, I didn't do market research on this, but I think the amount of money people might spend on supporting, let's say, three voices, whether it's reporters, commentators, if you have whatever it is, a flat rate where it's a network, people get access to it. It doesn't mean individual shows can't have their own things to, Patreons or things like that. But to me, that is really a matter of survival, because the way YouTube is going, it doesn't seem to me like it's going to be sustainable for a Status Coup or even some bigger channels, because at this point, it's clear to me they're shifting just towards sanitized, advertiser-friendly stuff. They don't like anti-capitalist stuff. They certainly don't like lefty stuff. So to me, my dream scenario would be Bad Faith, Breaking Points, Status Coup, like just coming together as one. Doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. There could be food fights, and that would make for good internet. But I don't know if that's an over-the-top, like OTT thing. I don't know if it's on YouTube. I'm sure there are progressives with money who could fund a engineered site for something like that, and apps. To me, that makes the most sense because I think collaboration is better. I think bigger shows elevating on the ground reporting, able to give people something to comment on.
Right. Instead of each other's videos.
Oh, there's so much, like, it's this new cottage industry where, like, people are reacting to this person's show, to this person's show. So that's my dream scenario. But if that's not going to happen in the short term, is really just, I think it's difficult, because you want to know something, like, everybody gets kind of caught up in the now. Not everybody, it's not that, like, you or others might not care, but everybody kind of loses track of, like, the Flints or other things, not because they're bad people, but that's just human nature. And there's so much information. The news
cycle, and there is this pressure. I mean, I don't think of myself as being caught up in algorithmic pressures, and we don't, like, Bad Faith doesn't really earn any money from YouTube. Our channel isn't that big. We're also post algorithm shift, and I would argue a little undersubscribed given the quality of the content. But we don't, like, but maybe like $1,000, $2,000 comes through on YouTube. It's not what's supporting the enterprise. So I'm not that invested in it. However, it seems obvious to me that it's not a moneymaker. And I agree with you. I agree with you that there was a world where we were all under one umbrella that could be really beneficial, not just financially, but also because I reflect on some of the interleft conflict that's happened over the course of the last year. And I reflect on how so many of the actors involved used to be under one umbrella. So many folks all were from TYT. Jimmy Dore, Cenk, Kyle, everyone used to be under this collective umbrella. And I wonder how something like Force the Vote would have played out if everyone were still coming together in the office every day or in the virtual office every day and forced to still interact as colleagues instead of kind of sniping in a series of videos, reply video, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's real solidarity gains to be had by there being some more unified front here. The question is how, and is it actually going to be financially viable? Is there someone who can appropriately and financially put us under one umbrella?
Yeah. And I also think, putting aside what that would look like, I also think for the actual project of the left, it is the most effective to reaching new people.
Yeah.
One network, umbrella, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't mean Briahna Joy Gray can't have bad faith on YouTube and, a podcast or this and that. But the project of the left should be to reach new people, maybe people on the right, and shift them over. I could tell you, having covered 2016 and 2020, there's a lot of MAGA Nation that loved Bernie Sanders. You know that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people I interviewed. They said, if not Trump, who? Bernie was number two.
Yeah.
That still exists. They're populists. And if there was one, yes, we would need funding. I mean, that is true. But if there was under one umbrella, a cohesive network, everybody's not going live at the same exact time. Everybody's not releasing at the same exact time. You had like a programming grid, collaboration. I think that could be really powerful to reaching new people. And I also think, honestly, I tried not to get involved in the inter-left, whatever that was. But at the end of the day, I think people need to realize that whether we agree on everything or not, because no one's going to agree on all things or not, I think at the end of the day, the people that would be part of what we're talking about agree. Yeah, the Flint water situation, yeah, that should still be in the news.
Yeah.
So if we had a network that could keep it in the news, if we had a network that had the resources to cover these strike actions, union drives, record number of workers quitting, I think a lot of these people that could be in a so-called network like that could really bounce off each other from the virtual office or whatever you describe. And also, you're not really as much at the mercy of any one algorithm if you're within that network and could really grow outside of big tech, YouTube, and those kind of things. So I think it's a great idea. Maybe we need to have
off the record conversation,
a summit.
Yeah. Look, we'll talk afterward, but we're not the only ones having this conversation, and there is definitely interest for sure. It's just, I mean, the thing is, I'm pretty new to this space. I wasn't someone who consumed a ton of online media before 2018, probably. But my understanding was that there was a time, again, long before a lot of these feuds, that, TYT was that umbrella organization. It was huge. It was sprawling. Everyone was a part of it. And I'm curious, from your perspective, why doesn't it seem to be serving the same purpose that it apparently used to serve?
Yeah. I don't want to go viral, but I'll just be honest. Listen, I appreciate the opportunity that Cenk gave me, but I will say there was kind of always a conflict there in terms of you want to call it a network, but you don't really want to elevate anybody but yourself. So, TYT at this point probably could have been $1 billion business if they would have just given Jimmy Dore a daily show, right? Cenk didn't want to do that. Frankly, I had to pull teeth to get my on-the-ground reporting featured on the main show at TYT. I'm not saying this to attack them. It's just, this is what happened. So TYT, there was this idea of making a network, but at the end of the day, if the force behind it, which at the time was Cenk, is basically just wants to hear his own voice and be on camera a lot, you're not going to elevate, because you're not going to create a network and it's not going to thrive with like only one face. You need to elevate a lot of different faces. The other thing also is, TYT, they were obviously the first originally in the game of this. They didn't have a lot of competition for many years on independent leftist media, but they started with me doing on the ground reporting, which people loved, but then they kind of stopped doing that. So to me, their failure or Jank's failure to really elevate new faces, new voices, to really push them so that it wouldn't just be like, Jank and, a band of other people. That is the advantage of what we're talking about, because to me, whatever, everybody has, a little ego and obviously we're on camera because we want to be heard. But to me, if you have a network where, yeah, maybe people tune in a little bit more for certain hosts or this and that. But if you have a network that boosts each other, there's collaboration. If I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, interviewing Briahna Taylor's aunts, that's featured on certain shows. If you have an incredible debate with somebody, that's featured on other shows. I don't want to, it lifts all boats, so to speak. Yeah. And that was the failure with TYT. I know that. They had other hosts and this and that, but those were there wasn't a lot of marketing or anything behind that. It was really the main show with this band of other stuff. It's unfortunate because I think TYT, obviously they kind of shifted a little bit politically too, but
to what do you attribute that? Because I've heard, people make their accusations and I try to stay out of those, so-and-so has bad motives fights. But as someone who used to work there, do you have any thoughts about what caused there to be a political shift?
Yeah, I think that I know a lot of people want to ascribe it to, the $20 million they got, this and that. I think that's the easy storyline. I don't want to say that had nothing to do with it, because obviously when you get $20 million from a major Democratic Party donor, that's not going to have zero effect, even if they don't technically have editorial control. With that said, though, I'll give an example here. And I've never said this publicly, so you're getting it.
Scoop.
I was on the ground in 2016 covering Tim Canova's race versus Debbie Wasserman Schultz. At the time, other than Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was like the most hated, neoliberal resistance, figure, whatever. So I was on the ground there. I was the only reporter covering Tim Canova's race. This was about a week before the primary between Canova and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So I interviewed Canova, and he gave me like a pretty big scoop. I mean, he basically said, yeah, I can't get Bernie Sanders to return my phone calls. Politico picked it up. All like the Washington media picked it up. I believe CNN did too. I called Jank. I said, hey, we're getting this clip to you. Like, do you want me to come on the show? This and that. Basically told me like, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to get it on the show. And I said, what do you mean you're not going to get it on the show? Like, why am I even here? Like literally the biggest down ballot race at the time, Tim Canova versus Debbie Wasserman Schultz, he basically just said, I can't get Bernie to return my calls a week before the election. That's like news in any world.
Yeah.
And he kind of gave me this birds and the bees speech. Like, well, there's the progressive. No, he said this. There's the progressive audience and then there's the general audience. So, and the general audience doesn't know who Tim Canova is.
Well, that's your job. So that's part of your job as a journalist.
So I said to him, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have the analytics. I'm telling you, your audience is progressive. They don't know who Tim Canova is, maybe because, well, first of all, they do, but to your general audience, they might not know who he is because you haven't covered it. Right. They do know who Debbie Wasserman Schultz is. That I can tell you. And generally, it's a smart thing if you're investing a lot of money to send a reporter around the country to highlight when they break news.
Yes, you're an asset. Besides which, to your point, the general audience, the politicos and the Hills and the whatnot, were covering it.
Right.
Which demonstrates interest.
So to me, that was the bigger issue rather than the money. There seemed to be a disconnect. And again, I do appreciate the opportunity Jank and them gave me, but there seemed to be a real disconnect with the grassroots, Jank. And then when Trump came in, I think it was genuine. I really think there was a Trump derangement that set in with him. I think Trump, some of it was valid. But I even saw like after Bernie dropped out, I mean, they shifted really hard to just like loser Donald segments and 7 segments a day on Trump. And they kind of stopped covering Hillary critically. I remember when the WikiLeaks started releasing Hillary's emails, I was like pumping out like 100 tweets a day, like highlighting each email. And I'd be feeding it to the producers of the show so they didn't have to do the work. I just told them the significance of each email, and they didn't really cover it. So to me, was it the money? Was it that Cenk was just out of step with like the grassroots progressive movement? Was it that he really just became really incensed with Trump? I think it was a mix of all things. But at the end of the day, their loss is our gain, their failure to connect. I mean, I respect, if he truly believed Donald Trump was the biggest threat, in one way, I respect that he would cover it a lot. But on the other end, you can't claim to be like, rebel headquarters and, the home of the progressives, and then you just stop really covering critically the Democratic Party, or you cover the Democratic Party critically here and there, but it's mostly Trump, Republicans. And I do think, based on knowing what I know about TYT, they were also looking at the clicks. Trump was doing well for them. More Republican-oriented topics were doing well for them. So to me, yeah, I don't know. I had some knockout fights with Cenk when I was there. So I don't know. To me, you can't say you want to have really have investigative reporting if you're not willing to highlight it. If at times you're fighting me on actually going to places because it costs money, which that happens sometimes. But at the end of the day, TYT is what it is now. And I think that there's a huge opportunity, and maybe we'll talk off screen about this. There's a huge opportunity if everybody could kind of put aside individualism for a second, to come together, because to me, I've seen it really up close traveling. Like, I don't think people really fully understand the level of the corporate media and the significance. I think you do, because you've been on both sides of this as a campaign official. But the only way you're going to counter that is with an actual organized media ecosystem to go against it. Right now, I think we just have everybody on their own island.
Yeah, it's funny. I do a weekly hit on Wednesday mornings at The Hill. And, they have you on and they ask you, this morning, what's the scuttlebutt with Manchin and, whatever Alabama coach is now saying he's mad at Manchin. And sometimes I think to myself, I don't know anything. To prepare for this, I read the same series of articles that everybody read, versus when I'm traveling on the road and actually doing reporting, or even when I was in Cleveland covering, very superficially compared to what you were doing, but the Senator Turner race, and I was doing hits on the Hill and elsewhere from Cleveland, I felt like I had so much more to say that was so much more informed and so much more useful, just because I had been to this church or that church, or had this conversation with that person or that person outside of a polling booth. And maybe my sample size was still only 10, 20 people, but it's much better than the 5, 10 articles that everyone's reading at the same time, from which I'm normally drawing an opinion. And so that's all to say that I think that you're an incredible resource to the left, just like truly incredible. And I would love to see us featuring your segments more often and regularly. I know that there's this kind of informal network of lefties that, cover each other's stuff and play to each other's strengths and boost each other. I appreciate when the Vanguard guys will cover something and give it another little boost. I appreciate when reporters like yourself, or people who are doing a lot of the labor reporting, come through the circuit. I like that, we can go on breaking points and we can boost each other and do things like that. But I think you're right. We'll be having some off the record conversations, and hopefully, Cenk and some TYT people can join in as well, because, I think that they might be introspective and open to maybe getting back to some of their roots as well. Because we all, no one's perfect. We're all fallible, mea culpa, all that stuff.
No, I'll just say, very simply put, and I've always said this. Sometimes people think I'm cheesy, but it's what I have observed. Believe it or not, most people in this country are not lacking compassion. Most people have no idea, not a clue what's actually going on. I use my parents as an example. God bless them. When I show them some of the stuff I cover on the ground, 9 out of 10 times, why is no one talking about this? Yeah. Why isn't CNN? Why isn't this on CNN? Yeah. And I say, because they're owned by multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerates. That's why. So I have observed that when the masses, not just like lefties, but righties, people with no designation, non-voters, when they see the content, in my case, what I've done on the ground, most of the time they care, and they're in many cases enraged and wonder why isn't this a bigger thing? So the question is, how do you get it to more people? And that goes to what we're exactly talking about. And I really think from commentators with big followings all the way down to Status Coup, that's how we do it, by everybody boosting each other, by collaboration. I hope that could be in the left's future for sure.
Can you tell our audience how they can support you now in the interim before we get our collectivist left media organization off the ground?
Absolutely. Status Coup, COUP on YouTube. Click the bell for all notifications. I have to remind people of these things. YouTube's made it difficult. So definitely subscribe, click the bell. We don't have any corporate funding, so we're usually just like rubbing quarters together to fund these trips. So if it's within your means, you could become a member for $5 a month. We do a Zoom call every month with our members. So that's statuscoup.com/join. Honestly, like this Flint story that we started talking about, I would have never been able to break any of this stuff if I didn't continually go to Flint. Like that was one thing with Jank. Like he was like, well, why can't they just tell you stuff over the phone? I'm like, that's not how reporting works. So, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you can support us financially, that's statuscoup.com/join, at Status Coup on Twitter. Although, we're on Instagram. And, I just hope more people tune in, because as much as I love the left reacting to other left and all that, at the end of the day, we need to elevate real reporting on the ground from strikes, union drives, protests, covering, movement types of things, Flint. And I think all of us should care about that. And I do know audiences care about that when they could see it.
Yeah. So I'm not even going to, this is a free episode, so a lot of people are going to be able to listen to this. I really am happy about that. I'm not even going to pitch bad faith Patreon. I want everyone who is even considering that right now to go ahead and consider throwing money to Status Coup, because it really is important reporting that's happening right now. And do not underestimate the importance of actually going and subscribing to these channels and clicking the bell. If you saw a video and you liked it and you thought it was informative, post it to your Facebook, retweet it on Twitter. Don't just retweet, but write something in addition to the retweet, because I find that there's more engagement that way if you can textualize your retweet. Even if you don't have $10 in the bank account, that kind of thing is free, and it's really appreciated by these independent left organizations. So thank you again, Jordan, and to our audience, as always, keep the faith. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.